Tsultrim. So we'll start with the Heart Sutra.
I prostrate to the Arya Triple Gem as a here one time, the almost running on massive waters mountain Rajgiri, together with the great community of monks and the great community of Bodhisattvas. At that time, the one was absorbed in concentration, categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasatva Arya Avadishvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom, and beheld those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, the Geshe said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasatva Arya Avadishvara.
How should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that in the Bodhisattva Mahasatva Arya Avadishvara, to the Shariputra. Shariputra ends in the lineage of the other lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom. Should do the body like this correctly and repeatedly beholding to his five gates also as empty inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form, emptiness is not other than form, form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, composition of practice, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra likewise, all phenomena are emptiness without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stains, not deficient, not deficient. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no composition of practice, no consciousness.
No eye,
No ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomenon. There is no eye element and soul to include no mind element, no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extension of ignorance, and so on to including no aging and death, and no extension of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and power. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, all without is reliant on the perfection of wisdom. The mind without obscurations and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the end point of nirvana. All the Buddhas and travelers also manifestly completely awakened to the unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment. You realize not the perfection of wisdom.
Therefore,
The mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of
acknowledge the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequal,
the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all sufferings with the knowledge of the truth and is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is the faith. Prayata om gate gate paragate parasangate bodhisattva. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasatva, should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagavad Gita is about concentration and commended the Bodhisattva Mahasatva Arya Avadishvara, saying, God said something it is like that, it is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom just as you have indicated, even if the others rejoice. The Bhagavan, having thus spoken, the Venerable Shariputra, Mahasatva Arya Avadishvara,
and those surrounding in their entirety along with the
all the gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas are overjoyed and highly praised as spoken by the Bhagavan.
I prostrate to the
And
gathering of the
the kings
deities
and the three chakras who abide in the holy earth of using space,
by all powers of
clairvoyance and magical animation, active practitioners looking on the head. Akasamata Shadanasamaya.
By the teachings of the three supreme jewels possessing the power of truth, may inner and outer hindrances be transformed, may they be destroyed, may they be pacified. Shinto Koriya Soha. May all living forces opposed to the Dharma be completely pacified. May the host of 80,000 obstacles be pacified. May we be separated from problems and harmful conditions to Dharma. May all their enjoyments be according to the Dharma, and may there be auspiciousness and perfect happiness here, right now. Sashi Bodhi Guru Ranananda Gandhiyataya Sanji Chodan Soji Janala Chancho Bardo Dami Kyasunji Dagi Shishi Gibe Sona Drogan Benche Sanji Drupara Sho Sanji Chodan Soji Janala Chancho Bardo Dami Kyasunji Dagi Shishi Gibe Sona Drogan Benche Sanji Drupara Sho Sanji Chodan Soji Janala Chancho Badu Dami Kyabsun Jibin Sonum Jin Drogan Benchi Sanji Drupara Shu Kanki Tuzini Zone Tawa Tamji Pambi Cheri Tambi Chun Tenzi Kwadam Jela Chanze Lo. Good morning, everyone. Tamsang Chigleya, any Sabajonga, the Jorum Chigi, and Chanju Sembigi, Dombat Nangadwasra, Nandi and Just Salakwa, Ningu Jab. Sapasang.
His Honor Dalai Lama is going to give the Bodhisattva vow on the 15th of Sakadawa. So Friday is a holiday. That's the 15th of Sakadawa. So it's going to be, I think, around 1:30 our time. But those of us who have been attending teaching with His Honor online recently know that sometimes it starts earlier. So Friday, noontime, be there. It's going to be all right. It's going to be great. Make the Bodhisattva vow great again. Geshe is hoping that we'll make some progress, that we will improve, that we'll be more kind-hearted.
The shooting the Yaburos, right? The talent of the Drushas came mixed Mevanza, Chichina, Pizutada, in Chidan, cousin in the Tada Chitam Shekata Yongo Sandi, in the Gando in the North Shastra, in Ainsley Yonchin, in the Mantalach to Chess in Yonchi, and the Leon, the Baptism, or Duchin Yabudos, right?
Yeah, so it's going to be this Friday, Chris. That's the 15th of Sakadawa. So we had an empowerment with His Honor the Dalai Lama last weekend. So it was supposed to start at 1:30, but His Honor has his preparation part. When you confer an empowerment, you need to do your own preparation. So His Honor showed up online earlier than 1:30, and some people were a bit freaking out. It's starting. Well, what started was the preparation of His Honor, the actual empowerment where we were supposed to join in, started roughly on time. So of course, it's good to come a bit earlier. So you sit down, His Holiness is doing his own preparations. In the meantime, you can make supplications, recite the Muni mantra or Muni 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 Soa, or the name mantra of His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. In that sense, you kind of prepare yourself for the empowerment. Anyway, that was last weekend when His Holiness conferred the empowerment. This time around, His Holiness will be giving the Bodhisattva vow. So as such, there is no such preparation. It is likely to start on time, but you can never know. Geshe said, it's actually, His Holiness has started earlier previously. So it's good to log in half an hour before. And this is what we're also going to do in this coming Friday. We're going to be a bit earlier, maybe half an hour earlier. Be ready for His Holiness whenever he turns up.
Kanga Tigor Dania, that D Genshine, and Yawarmchik Sonchuti, two Chiglaya, Miss Saya giving it, make Shutuyak, and he gain Chayatia, Church on the Sound Tamino, Beg Gawasambo, Namjudo Zimbana, and he didn't to your mark, Kansan Tutsu Mandan, Chewachin, Brody Horas, that Tandi Negolia, Tutsu Tutsu Yoba, and Yavarujigi, that Sigwag Tony, and Kachu Tinti Toyodi, and some Shimba and the shoes Kawasam Redos.
We're experiencing some difficult times due to COVID-19. So that came up due to some adverse conditions that came to play. However, when you look at that from a different perspective, we can also say that we're quite fortunate to be experiencing such conditions at the present. So we have, normally we're quite busy. His Holiness might be giving teachings, but for many of us, we don't have the ability to join. It is said that reports say that more than 1 million people join in for His Holiness's teaching. So when you think of so many people, a great number of people joining in for receiving teachings from His Holiness Dalai Lama, you can say that that's in some sense the condition of this sickness coming to play. You can put like a positive spin on it in that sense. So, we are fortunate to receive those teachings from His Holiness Dalai Lama. Is beholding us or considering us with his great compassion, and he's teaching us. So from our side, we're really fortunate.
Namjum Boom Chickney, Yavrus Sonjing the Slana, Hansang to Chigoras. The Dalin Saya gay, Joe. Saya Kajusu means the Saya gay of Geshe Yarendos, Hansang Kawasambo.
So normally when you hear about the number of people that attend His Holiness's teachings, during those massive events, public teachings that His Holiness gives, at least in India, you have sometimes 100,000 or 200,000 people joining the teachings. But looking at the reports from Facebook Live and YouTube and so forth, guess I can't remember the numbers, but it was in the millions, 8 or 9 million people that have viewed those teachings. This is incredible when you think about it. Now we have tea. So we're gonna do the whole tea offering thing. It's like our own tea ceremony. Have to stop.
가서 참 되긴 있었다. 니바 두당 교당 넘버 소지 거니 딕바샤바 70%. 그래.
인그래.
야, 네. Interesse.
So we're going to go back to the text and pick up from the point that we left off in the previous session. So we are looking at chapter number 2. We came to the section that covers the laying down of negativities, purification of negativities. So we've looked at the general explanation. Then we began with the extensive explanation. We're currently covering an extensive explanation of the first power, the power of regret. Now, in that section, having investigated the way in which negativity was performed, feeling regret, we've covered the first point, requesting the attention of the object to whom you confess negativity in verse 27. Now we're going to pick up from verses 28 and 29 that come under the second point, which says confessing negativity is performed in the past by means of their time, cause, and aspect, etc.
Terdadi saji korangi senliya and digbachiba chirshakwa said. Digbachiba chirshakwa chitangi digbashapa says Rita. The chitang slang, the chirshaba slana, kazing onto Dongdang digba nishin, ni shin susu shaksuchi and shame bus. The D and susu much of a chitang digba shaksuti and namjing onto chishak sage chogaji was raw. But chishak doji any lola yobina, Susunga tola yoban, that deeds didn't be Tony. Any Shadam Chevaina, any Mansang Mevach, Sanguioris, Titolia, Pig, Shayu Saltaviare, Shaji Digby Song Tayare, and Tamalia, Chipilia, Shadam Sujan Insu, and Chansanji Dioris, Dioris, Digitan Rimbuyo Marda.
Going back for a second to the outline, it says, confessing negativity performed in the past by means of their time, cause, aspect, etc. Looking more precisely at this heading, it should be actually translated as general confession of negativities performed in the past by means of the time, cause, and aspect, right? So it's a general confession. So yesterday we spoke briefly of the difference between negativities and downfalls, right? So we want to confess them or lay them down. And one ritual that we use, or one recitation that we use in order to do that is the general confession that you find in the section of the 35 Confessional Buddha in the FMT handbook. So there is the Golden Book. So there is the general confession. Geshe says that it has everything complete in that general confession in terms of the objects that you use for confessing, for laying down your negativities. With respect to the downfalls and negativities that you have performed, you know, the entities also found there. The way of laying them down, everything is found in a complete and perfect way in the general confession. It's not a long text, it's actually rather short. It's probably only like a page and a half. So if you can memorize it and also use it for the laying down of negativities, that would be really helpful.
Teresa, Shagu Digbing, Digba Kanchebadi, the cousin Shibanan Shingi, Susamaya, Siwchin, Chen Goyati, and Chen Telia, mean, thank you for Tubana. The Shadam Yashuk, Chagoris,
And as we said previously, you need to identify, to recognize the nature, the entity of negativities. And you need also to clearly recollect them in your mind, to think about them as clearly as you can. And when you can recollect them as clearly as you can, a sense of regret arises in your mind. And that's the best way of laying down in negativity, is confessing them and developing a sense of restraint. When you do it with negativity, it is done, when you do it with a sense of regret, it is done in the best way.
Teri dinza tan duzu jidang nganzu ma tsigdi loshana tsigdi lehabu tat doas rayina ya dizu tanda di chima chiji nyamsu lemba di ta pe ani yani yam sang nembuji madana ani leyan shoyagi ta pe nyenga doas pe ngada ngada ya pe nyenga chimbo ro pe nang nganzu ge dinani zu di digba megiwa chujiba sech ra ta nganzu lunga yisum la tem bi in digbi gi domro di megiwa chudras megiwa chu chewa la ya chi karso ta chi zawani ni di chi bak sawa ro neba bedi yani yin shasha ji tola ya roja joros digba megiwa chu jetsa bi jela ya chi angin digma so samsung ki Gyobachiate, Ching Benuros.
So normally our attitude towards the laying down of negativity is quite easy. We apply ourselves to a certain practice of laying down negativities, and when we put it into practice, we say a certain recitation, or we repeat a certain recitation, and we might repeat it a few times, but our mind becomes quite loose or casual about the laying down of negativities, in a sense that we don't, although we repeat the procedure for laying down negativity, we don't really take it seriously. We do it in a casual manner. So we spoke about negativities and downfalls, and we do them without body, speech, and mind. Or in short, when we look at the 10 non-virtues done by body, speech, and mind, we might practice or say certain recitation for laying down such non-virtues and negativities, but in some sense, we often don't take that too seriously. We say that, but at the very core of our heart, we're still lacking on really meaning it. In a sense that when you think of the performance of a negative action or a non-virtue with your body, speech, and mind, as soon as you perform that, the sense of alas, or such a pity, it is such a pity that I've done this action, that sense, that state of mind should arise, but often it doesn't happen, does it?
Re tanda jisha ki choga dinong la ya ani nenga che chamang lo gi da sema karsa ming tenshin digbi gi ming ani tenshin yores ro bi da chi sosu ta bi domba dang ga wa chanju sim la ba dang ga wa sangan chi tam chi dang ga wa ani phata ma la ma ku ba kemba de de la ma ku ba tro sam chu chu ba no ma ku ba kunjo su ne bi le ge ba so ba slav chin ra sama yores dina.
In the ritual of general confession, do we have it here in the Golden Book, or is it in the Grey Book?
So we're talking
Yeah, this one.
Okay, page 53.
Page
That's 54.
54. Yeah. So in this Golden Book, it is found in page 54, the general confession. So the names of the confessions are repeated. Oh, sorry, the names of the titles of the negativities are repeated in this general confession. So it says that, for example, I've transgressed the vows of individual liberation, transgressed the vows of the Bodhisattvas, and transgressed the samayas of the second mantra. I've been disrespectful to my parents, disrespectful to my Vajra masters and my abbots, and disrespectful to my spiritual friends living in ordination. So this recounting of the negativities and downfalls that or non-virtues that we have accumulated are mentioned in a brief manner in this text. So it's quite useful actually to use that as a way of recollecting the negative actions that we have done.
아니 심전 탐지기 지도 라면 조정 공부 되는 이거는서 아니 전주 심빌 라발라고 그래서 전주 심빌 라발라야 또 지소 파시 줄을 라고 그래서 지소 파시 줄을 라운데다 직 짐바 수준 서버 송르스 또 딩한 직 수준 송야다 비 서버 공야디 아니 기치 유치하게 도왔다 서버 찌단기 직 드로 리트루야 로 소즈 단위 파마솔에 캬바메부터 서버 공고고라스 공고가 다 딘디시 이니 탐젤이야 소복 소비냠네 용야래야 년 탐보 지 아니 소소래야 신의 가든치비 아니 파마겐고레 아니 다 기비시니레 아니 톡 삼바 숨바줘야 아니 소바지 고마투나 아니 셴바기 지 소소 다타 데살이야 아니 소복곰 투세드다 에 용야 메디케자더레도스 란 나는 니 섬도 시고다 단단 안주기 미망보질이야 라든 지 쉔기 소도 망보질이야 소소 파마 겐고 도소기 비리야지 녀트스는도 됐지 다 겐고 차원디 아니 루코본디 텔레템비기 아니 샘라바 엄봉갈레 템비기 샘라바 도소마 아니 코본디 잠발라지 다 갈수다 가드는 녀트가 소르지 용대야지 용거로 왔어 다 딘통디게 아니 지 될 때니 팜 디균센 손진 아니 파마라야 마고 체대야 파마 겐고라야 자인 마가와 체대야 아니 남규 때인데 딘디 빼망부 연구도 왔어 듣수 빼마스 왔더니 디바 잡지 간지 수술이야 아니 빼 류징hin기 가딘징기 파마들이야 소복고 마투바이나 다 딜리 기비기 미셴바질이야 소복공이 슬라바이나 아니 다가스 소소소 고고 땅에 계자되지 마도 대응 엄마 잔주선비 냐면 싸우는 조마레스라
So in general confession will refer to certain negativities or non-virtues that we have accumulated. Like for example, it says we have transgressed the vow of Bodhisattva, so the trainings in the conduct of Bodhisattva. So particularly here, when we look at what we're doing now, so we are studying the Guide to Bodhisattva Way of Life in order to know how to engage in the trainings of Bodhisattva. So this is what we practice. We're now practicing the trainings of Bodhisattvas. And we're doing that for the sake of attaining the state of enlightenment for the welfare of all sentient beings. And for that end, we take up the practice of the 6 perfections, generosity and ethics, patience, joyous effort, absorption, wisdom. We take up those perfections, the practice of those perfections, and now primarily we're practicing ethics and patience. When we practice patience, we practice it with respect to mother sentient beings of the 6 realms of existence. This is how we practice patience, with respect to all of them. So when we then practice patience with all sentient beings that were so kind to us, we think of those that were especially kind to us, like for example, our aging parents, our virtuous friends, spiritual teachers, and so forth. Or to our friends around us. So we begin with that. But if you cannot be patient, if you cannot practice patience with them, how can you be patient with other sentient beings? If you claim that you're practicing patience with respect to all sentient beings, and yet you don't practice it properly with your aging parents, for example, you're just claiming that you're practicing patience. So this is something to keep in mind, because as it happened now at this day and age, Geshe sometimes encounters young people that don't practice it well with their aging or ailing parents. So it happens that when your parents get old and the physical constituents start to deteriorate, right? So they're not as strong as before. They start to experience some physical problems. The body disintegrates, degenerates, and so forth. When that happens, it is also likely that some cause states of mind will operate in a person that undergoes this situation. So when it happens to one's parents, sometimes a sense of disregards to them arises. You become disrespectful to them. You become irritated or short-tempered. You might also express it physically. So then, if you don't practice patience with your parents when that happens, and you still claim that you're practicing patience, where basically you're deceiving yourself and you're deceiving others. It is actually a great negativity to treat your parents in such a way. And those are the people that were so kind to you in giving you this body. So, if you cannot practice patience at least with them, then your practice of patience is actually not happening it is not a good quality. It is not a right practice of patience. It says, so Matt is asking if one has a repetitive negative habit, like getting cross with someone close and speaking harshly, and keeps periodically repeating the anger despite always doing purification with genuine remorse, can Geshe recommend a way to break out of the anger cycle? Dila samsam mutune dikpa shagi nyamnen dende chenaya ani kanto du chenaya sansan de motion bachela de komshito ne yane yando dende kondo sagirwa ni kondo di lo matuba dende chagirwa chezandi de kondo di lo tamatuba tiktu dende lo tamatuba ane de chapchi du dikpa shag nyamnen di chewaina de Sheda pengi marwa. Dila kiran samna kharachena yaksara.
Sorry.
Dila posa dila Matt lagi yore. Ne dila yongi mara pesho ko Sydney la yaksara. Matt, you're based at Sydney, right?
Yeah.
All right.
Tadi karsawarda. Nganzu di country nimik di sam mathubi wangi ta nganzu khundro di jamthuyo marwas so direshas ra country nimik sam mathuba decha ki nimik sam mathuba so dindi lewondi ani shemba khar chede bayne ya kolya ne mathuba jingudo asra.
What happens often is that we haven't really fathomed deeply the drawbacks of anger. Or for the Geshe said that we can also say the drawbacks of attachment. So we don't speak about the disadvantages of anger and so forth, and yet in our heart or in our mind, we haven't really come to terms with those great disadvantages of anger.
Re danganzu delaya kaptu kira dichi gore dichina tagaran pigila yachi me nanshin shidor sachi yomarwas di yomaras tira te kansan gyundengi ta mi khondro tsabu jimbaina ti gyundengi khondru gi nimik samgoyadi dangan sam mamu taindaro ta sam mamu se da khadu sam tawaina ya khondro ma jamya gi gyujin so di khondru 가주스 소소래 never chigdo control kari nimi kari yabati dia sam tu baina kansam jilaya control san tenichi ta gobat timdu samya meba sati tenden tong tu yasares ta control san gobat samni meba tong di sambala 아니 컨트롤 사도지디 쇼메버지 아니 썸투야지 회시 연구열에서 라 딜레바이나 컨트롤 좀 약이 다 약슈트 디만도 찍은다 아니 컨트롤 자와디 때문에 두고래 때문에 이거 쪼디 아니 다음에부터 이 시들에 땅은 돈이 겁나 다를 써야지 지당 레스 이내야 먼저 카프툴이야 돈이 검사야지 갈카고 쇼지게 니선 빼갈카고 그래서 간신 돈바니 거와 차야라야 알담보 소사 드르자야고 지고 왔습니다 이 갑데라야 손음 그 맞아 와이나 아니 돈바니 가주 시에바이나야 샘나노라야지 아니 거발렌사디 빼카고 인사레스 디만나 아니 디 거와 디 또기 때문에 내고 딜내 돼야 될 신호 가보러 왔어.
This is how Geshe thinks about it regularly. When we think of how much weight or power do we ascribe to anger, although we say that anger is a disadvantageous state of mind, still we don't shy away from that. Like, for example, suppose that you're doing a certain action and someone is warning you that could come at the cost of your life. So this is actually very serious, right? So if someone cautions you that whatever you do can cost your life, then you become a bit frightful, or you take it more seriously. So we don't really have the same attitude with respect to anger. We acknowledge that anger is a negative state of mind, that it is a disadvantageous state of mind, but in some sense, we haven't completely came to terms with how negative anger is. So this is how Geshe thinks about it with respect to himself, because he said that he has given it quite a lot of thought. He gave it quite a lot of our inability to arrest anger was something that Geshe was thinking of quite a lot. And he said that in order to destroy anger, you need to, or to put a stop to anger, you need to look at the causes and conditions that will give rise to the elimination of anger. How you work with cause and conditions that will bring about the destruction of anger. So long as we don't see the futility of anger, so long as we don't see how it is of no use to us, no purpose to us, the cause and conditions for the destruction of anger will not come about in a forceful way. So there are other ways sometimes that we speak about the elimination of anger. Like, for example, we say that anger and likewise other afflictive states of mind are based on ignorance. And in order to destroy ignorance, we need to cultivate the exalted knowledge that realizes selflessness. And this is correct in general. And yet the implementation of that is quite difficult. In that, first of all, it is difficult to generate an understanding of selflessness or emptiness. In order to generate that understanding, we need to have the support of the accumulation of the collections and the purification of negativities and obscurations. So just in order to develop an understanding of selflessness, we need to have a lot of merit. We need to have accumulated the collection. So it is not an easy feat at all. And then once you develop an understanding of selflessness, it's still difficult to use that understanding in order to destroy anger. So it is an avenue, or it is a way of putting a stop to anger. And yet, it is difficult. So if we don't really start with looking at the drawbacks of anger and really develop a sense of, really internalize or come to fathom completely the drawbacks of anger, would be difficult just to use the understanding of selflessness, or attempt to use just the understanding of selflessness in order to make that happen.
파다말라마 그거세디 직장도스 딩안 ngan도 베케치무로지 기침부 라오지 말다 기침부 쇼지레스 라는줄이야 먼저 파다말이야 그바치 마투나 파다말 소바고 마투나 파다말 잠직 따마투나 데니 딜리 셴바질이야 지 아니 그바다 잠제다 지 소바곰세디 자원이니다 용해 주식 가서 무스 소소래야 비 류짐바 잠마임바 아니 지 배나 아만다고 지면 가츠시키 땅간줄에 잠지요레스 가츠스간줄에 미스요레스로 깔리 칸드스키야겠다 되게 통다 발송이야 아니 지다 레트 로 자원이 요마다 난주 미션질이야 잠지치 거들래 망제지 아니 레트 삼바지 토 소소래지 케빈지 토니 아니 잠지 제대로 마도 수 케빈 자원이 네버 마시 제등인지라 파 잠지 검사디 잔주 셈범에 봐다 깔라가고 쇼도서로 다 소소 디디지야 아니 가딩기 짠 송인기 파마들이야 디 가딩디 아니 솔마투나 디 가딩 솔부터니 잠지 검마투나 메셴바가 잠지 검시 그바치세 백하고레스 드니야지 기비시니 최등이래야 잠지 가서 그바치생 백하고레스 인정한수 파마래야 아니 잠지 마금나 그거 맞지나 딕바 치슈임바디 드니 손이 아니 지금 추냐면 베디 시살라로에도 차고도스 인자 딕바 치고 드니 차 디진 차고르더라
Then coming back to the topic that Geshe was bringing up, we're here looking at the practice of laying down negativities. And it is important to consider those negativities that we purify with respect to our mother and father that have treated us with a great sense of loving concern. They've nourished us at the beginning, in the middle, and at the end. So much hard work and so much sacrifice went into the process of our upbringing. And there's a sense of reliance that we have developed in that relationship. So when you think of developing that sense of reliance, or that you entrust yourself to another person, sometimes stood up with thinking that there's something to be gained by doing that. If there's someone that you dislike, don't have that sense of loving concern to that person, you're not going to entrust yourself to that person. You're not going to find that sense of reliance in your heart on that person. And yet with our parents, when we think of how they've treated us, they've treated us with great kindness. They've treated us with a great sense of concern, loving concern. Not only our parents or our mother, but also our virtuous friends as spiritual teachers. So then treating them in a way that is disrespectful, treating them in a way that is inappropriate, is regarded as a grave negativity, which causes you to lose the very basis, the very foundation of your spiritual practice.
지 콘로차도 배데 에니지 뇨타시도 세도치 딘디 균전 장고라서 디 에니 가서다지 태버침비 취 냠네 제 미싱이지기 계절엔도스라 만 태버침비 취 냠네 쟁이지다 제 신인지 임바이나 에니 파쇼마 가주스 콘로치와 가주스기 비길에 뇨타차요 디 저기 닌지 유려야 아니 슈치르 조고다스라 먼저 닌지 유주디 아니 뉴몬비 샤원도 줄리기 아니 심젠디 닌지 유조이 바스라 조디차고라스 진짜 지 파마겐고 취미싱이 하던도 취미싱이 취 어딘지기 지피래야 차담모성 샤원도 좋은디 믹스기 되네지 소소리야 까딘체와 준센송이 아니 닌지 따고야다 아니 잠지 치고야디 균sen zuolai zhugu dasra
And often in our mind, we come up with reasons and arguments why it is suitable to behave in a way that we behave. Like, for example, we think that I have a reason for disrespecting them. I have a reason for disliking them. So we come up with those reasons. We set up, for example, because they haven't treated me properly. They're troublesome people, or they're so angry, they're so short-tempered with me. So my anger towards them is justified. But when you come up with those reasons, it could be a clear indication to you that you don't know how to practice the Mahayana Dharma. Because if you take your practice of the Mahayana Dharma to heart, then particularly you would develop compassion towards people that have this nature. If someone is suffering due to a troublesome attitude, due to being angry, due to performing things that are inappropriate, due to being so thoroughly under the control of anger, attachment, and ignorance, it is a particularly important object for compassion. So this is how you consider such difficult people from a Mahayana perspective. Particularly towards them, you should have an additional degree of loving concern or compassionate attitude. This is there is a main reason. This is the main reason or argumentation that we use in the cultivation of compassion in a Mahayana way.
Tini chiglaya da magu yongya pena pamari gigin re givishin re trot samba sumba chobare samalaya da magu yongya gi kin chigdi nganzu gi genji da 통세나 문제 견지 대신에 연구하러 왔더라. 아니 다디 배낭 간주기 다 산지 쭉 님부 송디 비길이야. 덴바니 세티. 로 덴바니디 최탐지 그때도 덴바니게 남자한테 되게 어렸어. 된자 최탐지려야 가리얼스라디 비길이야. 아니 초 찍려야 덴비차 찍다. 근데 초도 그거는 초 찍려야 덴비차다. 초 찍려야 준비차지. 간지 내출 찍다. 난출기 넘바니디 최탐지려야 남자한테 되게 어렸어. 된자 간주 난출 그 차니 균진 디손 때는 줘봐이나 가드이나 만디바직 간지 깽 차니 성탄 줘나 가드이나 마롱아지다 만디바지도 연구요 말했어. 아니 비기가 뎀비 내루트 식투바이나 아니 타와드 탐지기 미살이야 로트월 디나신기 연딩기 찬 때투바이나 아니 마그바디 연구 말했어. 잠지 엔투그리 그 대바샤 투그리 상마 용투그리스 진짜 수수 따추고 털어야 간지 가리 용다 마용디 수수 따추고 털어야 조기여 야샤자레스 야샤자레스.
Another point that Geshe wanted to bring up with respect to dealing with a sense of disrespect that we have towards our parents, with respect to our virtuous friends, our teachers, our Dharma friends, is to look at the way that we are conditioned to view them in a particular way. A way of viewing them, a way of considering them plays a role in that attitude. So just to explain that, we say that the essence of the teachings of the Buddha Dharma, is the two truths, the presentation of the two truths. And the presentation of the two truths applies to all phenomena, which means that when we look at all phenomena, we can say that they have two perspectives that we can adopt with respect to them. On one hand, there's a truth with respect to them. From another perspective, there are falsities. So there is a truth aspect to them and a falsity aspect to them. That has to do with the way that they exist and the way that they appear, right? The mode of existence, the mode of abidance, and the mode of appearance. So the mode of appearance and the mode of abidance are often discordant. So from the perspective of the way that we consider the way that they appear to us, we for example, focus on faults. We see faults, and when we always see faults, inevitably problems will arise. There will always be problems if we pay attention to those faults, or if we focus on those faults. So rather than focusing on faults, we can look at things that are true. Like, for example, look at the qualities that such people have. Observe the good qualities, develop a sense of love and concern through them. Now, if you observe their qualities, then you will have an additional or a high degree of love and concern towards them, more faith in them. So in that sense, we train our mind to not look at faults, but to view the good qualities. So in that sense, we can see how it has to do with the way that you consider, the way that you view those people, rather than paying attention to or focusing on the faults and thereby giving rise to problems. Focus on the good qualities.
아니 덴비기 차디 레기 차디 자원님 통투요 말어스 아니 좀비기 차오 밀레기 차지 마도 간 수수기 아니 샘디 차당 모종 베 집치단 안 견디 차고라스 디자 아니 비길이야 나온다 마트브 세디 나랑 소리야 나원난 신기 비 유코랑 빈 딘디지 레베스나 니출레 딘디지 레베스 자원님 말레스 is a dinzang anzuta janggoya pigilaya ani dembashi dembanila soba janggoya junsen so derwasra.
For example, Geshe said that noise is an ordinary being. So then, being an ordinary being, then Geshe said that you cannot see this the truthful or the true aspect, the good aspects of others. What appears to his mind is often this faulty aspect, that falsity, the false, the aspect that is not good or not wholesome. And it happens when your mind is still completely covered by anger, attachment, and ignorance. It is obscured by anger, attachment, and ignorance. So your approach to that is to remind yourself that things do not exist in the way that they appear to you. They appear in one way, but they do not exist in that way. So you need to train yourself in reminding yourself that things do not exist in the way that they appear. And you do that in drawing upon the presentation of the four truths, the presentation of the two truths and the like.
저것이 그런 대가리 열어서 네 발도 안 가서 가르래 컴리얼스라디 차담 모선이야 컴 디왕기다 지 아니 디바 sab지 베디 엔다 타메바치 사요바디 다지비 투투고레스 진짜 두주 참만도 베 아니 세부 진 생리야 텐지 되니 다 라마도진 좀 뭐처럼 소바 세기 비기라야 직샤유 아니 살야고 답신 딘딘이야 아니 샘띵이 아니 샤바 표이나 덴덴 타고르스다 덴덴 타고르스 간사 디비기 뭔가 기어담아서 송도다 디벨라야 디발라야 연된 치여버티 샤네 타기여버티 디비 연데레스 어디르다 로
In the general confession, it says, first of all, it says in the first paragraph, it addresses great Guru Vajradhara, and then it says, I, whose name is so-and-so, circling in cyclic existence from beginningless time until the present, overpowered by delusions. So you consider the fact that you've been circling in samsara since time without beginning and up until now, becoming so habituated with anger, with attachment and ignorance. And those afflictive states of mind are so serious and they're bottomless. So you need to think about it and to clearly see how this is the case of being governed by those afflictive states of mind. And As this general confession begins, you call upon Guru Vajradhara, the Vajra holder. And you, at the presence of the Vajra holder, your Guru, you lay down your negativities, you confess them with a clear and sincere, heartfelt state of mind. One quality of non-virtuous negativities is that they can be purified.
Tirdadi zawadere thoma meden koani serum dewan shendadu dagi manse digi bang yedu zawa nyintani timung tribi danun di jisu yeran kanji ba nobateni tujini sambata bengoyan la shas.
Let's look at verses 28 and 29 that cover this section of this confession. So it says, general confession from the point of view of time, cause, aspect, and so forth. From beginning the cyclic existence in this life and in others, the negativities that I have done by myself or induced others to do, which I hid due to being confused by ignorance, that I rejoiced in, seeing these faults, I confess them to the protector from the depth of my heart.
Dirda nganzu sa shimba sa karsa sa samba ro debi tyugi ta chik tikba sa samba ta tadal ju tyugi ta tikba sa shimba ta maung bi tyugi ta sabar tyugi ta digbi namba ka yoba te thamji semna yapu tenchin tini ta shagdam chiko res ta dodo tere.
In short, we need to be thinking of the negativities that we have accumulated in the past, those that we are accumulating at the present, and those that will be done in the future. Calling upon all of them, we lay them down.
아니 총 냠도 제투비 깔라 다 아니 디바 샹인지마 아니 디바 또 친구 간르지마이나 베 아니 뒤인튼동 지금 샤투 비게 아니 고급디다 여러와스 다야 미싱인지마나 무퉁인지마나 다 두주치를 여바이나 아니 디바 사야 준로야 근데 년가 되는 용도 왔으라 또 상황도 신고해 지레셨으라.
So we call all of those negativities to mind and we lay them down. So normally, if you are in close proximity to your aging parents, to your virtuous friends, your teachers, to your Dharma friends, and so forth, then being together with them or in their vicinity, you lay down your negativities. Then even if they are grave negativities, you can reduce the efficacy of those negativities. Whereas if you don't really pay attention to that, if you don't really understand that, you might be at their presence or in close proximity to them and still continue to create or to accumulate grave negative actions.
Then David Nanolaya, two Thomas Mebadan Dembi, Kovan Corny, Sondi, Serapdom, Jandala. Dan ligi namen la mombo ju ongi digbi lege batans rale da le gyunde namjat mashidi en dig namen debu khari yobende singmaros tindila mombi ongi en tigba chegi yore gewasa tu yo mare soya dere da jenda gi gedu zawadan ge ne lendrela mombi temun tru da nonde jengi digba chebala jesu yorama kangi bi nebaten rangi nomon ton genin Geshe to samba tabe gombo namla shati michirchi mipevos.
In the commentary it says, I've circled in cyclic existence since beginning this time. I confess all negativities that I've done in this and other lives due to being confused with regards to the ripening result of karma, being confused and not knowing, not understanding the fruitional result of actions that I have done in the past. I confess the negativities that I have done myself and those that I have other induced to do, as well as the faults of having rejoiced in the negativities of others due to being oppressed by the confusion of ignorance regarding the law of cause and effect. Generating an understanding of these faults of mine, I regret them and accordingly confess them from the depth of my heart to the protectors, not hiding or concealing them. 대신 주시죠.
Is it true, Geshe, that just allowing yourself to become angry, even just for a few moments, can destroy hours of virtue? You spend a lot of time practicing well and everything like that, and then you walk outside and somebody looks at you the wrong way and you get angry.
And you punch them.
That's right.
All right.
And in that moment, you can destroy a lot of virtue that you have spent hours working at.
All right. So I'm just going to repeat the question for people at home. So, is it true that if you get angry just for a brief moment, or just a few minutes, and is it true that you can destroy virtue that you have accumulated for so long, having done good practice? Sometimes although kind of regularly you practice, you're doing your practice at home, you go out and someone is looking at you the wrong way or rubbing you the wrong way, and anger arises. So, is it true that even if the anger is short-lived, just a few moments of anger, can that destroy those great hours of virtues that you have accumulated in your practice? Tila konro sadurwa konro du tuntun la newaina kama kashimato manewaina. 근데 개와 주rin 보사와 개와 좀 두개로베스. 내가 낭균 가서 소소 샤라 소소 나나 된데 냠네 호타와타체 두츠 mambo 된데 단체 아니 개와 두츠 mambo 신라 콤바체 개와 된데 사와이나 디젤라 치올라 드로이나 미치 남겨 때 소보든데 태와이나 선선든데 컨트롤 사게로와 근데 세컨드 카시 카마카시 된데 디 사와이나 두츠만보 추츠만보 사베 게와디 존 용게르베스
the control 참아다 말아 단 점에 열스 송가 점에 열스 간스나다 피게 control 대야 숙체종 control 숙체종디 아니 control 사사 유기 차네 아니 control 때에 예바 체종 디니마무 쓰고레스 페나 아니 ngaran sutrawachi chanju sem tapena ngatawachi 아니 chanju sem 맹인지기 아니 chanju sem 용인지기 간사지야 아니 control 세바이나 control 하장 예바 침보 니기 빼 다지 까오 몽불이야 사시비 개자디 아니 깨지지가야 점로야 어딘지 로고레스 대양 control 사자 유구톤 만지지 아니 유캬바전이야 엠비기 게자 라보치 싸요 봐요. 다지 갈서 다 열 멤버 세고라 열 멤버 딘딜이야 아니 콘도 싸바는 콘도 디기 아니 게어든 정구 말했어.
Well, it depends on a few factors. No, not all angers are the same in that there are different degrees, different strengths of anger. And also it depends upon the object of anger. So there are cases of anger in which roots of virtue are destroyed. And there are other cases of anger when that will not happen. So for example, just to illustrate that, Geshe said that suppose someone that doesn't have the mind of enlightenment is getting angry at another person which has the mind of enlightenment, it is said that eons worth of accumulation of virtue will be destroyed by getting angry at someone that has developed bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment. So if it could be that your anger is strong and the object of anger is someone that has developed bodhicitta, so eons worth of accumulation of virtue will be destroyed. But then There could be another scenario where the object of anger is not someone that has developed bodhicitta, but someone that doesn't have bodhicitta. It could be a different strength or degree of anger. In that case, that amount of fruits of virtue will not be destroyed. So there are different cases corresponding to the object of anger, to the strength of anger, and so forth.
아니 술을 때는 디바 총여바는 텔을 때는 디바 샤고 배나 먼저 녀바지 제여바나 그 아니 녀바 제사들이야 공다스 라고 그러스 녀바 제사 디수주 아니 라바이에 쳐들샤 아니 공다 디 라바이에 쳐그메들이야 공다 라바이나 공다 드그마르스테라 강라 때니 아니 녀바사사 텔이야 아니 교사치고 그랬어.
Next in the text, verse 30 comes out of the heading of confessing heavy negativity created with regard to special objects. So when you lay down your negativities, when you confess them, you do that in relation to the object that you use for the creation or for the accumulation of those negativities. This is the way that it works. You lay them down in relation to those that you used as object for the creation of such negative action. So it's quite, Geshe is quite straightforward. Like, for example, suppose that you have harmed someone, you've faulted them. You should apologize to them rather than apologize to someone else. It's like, it doesn't make sense, for example, to suppose that you've harmed a certain person, you've faulted that person, they're here on your right side. So it doesn't make sense to then request forgiveness from another person that is at your left. You're going to request the forgiveness of the one that you've harmed. So similarly, with the laying down of negativities, we lay down the negativities with a sense of regret with respect to the objects that we've harmed or the objects of performing negative actions. Verse 30 reads, whatever harm I've inflicted to the three jewels, father, mother, or other teachers, with body, speech, and mind due to afflictions.
파마당 라마당 어디서 군조숨다 어디서 차기도 왔어. 이거 참지 사사기 차고 왔다. 니가야 다치당 나다가 잡아. 비기 차당 모성기 샤원도 줄대 까려야 지 일려야 아니 마섬고 쌈나야 고디 샤원도 줄대 연자 일 쌈 쇼도 거레스. 콘도 사 쇼도 거레 농투 샘라 농투 쇼르고레스 이나야 디다 냠도 존나 아니지 루다 나기 네바 마사에 치야기 아니 가주스 탑시 여여 제고서라서 까고려야 가주 룽가 익슴 그 토니 비기야 율텔이야 디바사 쇼바나 디바다 텔 디바 또 치에 매바지 디바 큐토고레스 근데 이기고는 싸마이나 아니 나그고는 마템바 류긴 남기 마셔야 소바 딘디 체고다서라 개지 딘디기 빼기 따지 룽가 있음 그 저와도 찬산지 아니 쇼바이나야 아니 무시 만로야 디비 무시 마사야 디비 무시 사바이는 주기 빼기 따지 까까려야 가지고 미치려야 아니 콜론 독자지 켄 마르치야 콜론키 아니 무시 빼기려야 마르치 세위지라 양게 가와 검대야 저러스 다디 아니 배 디바디 정문 죽수 용수 저거 참이 디바 떡친데 차도 버렸어. 디디 마용이야. 간지 딘디 마용이야 지고야 돼. 배키치 모르겠어.
Here in verse 30, we speak about objects for the performance of serious negative actions with respect to your parents, with respect to your lamas, with respect to the 3 objects of refuge. So in general, Geshe says that someone like us, governed by anger, attachment, and ignorance, even if we try not to think of these objects of afflictions, inevitably we do, and then anger arises. We fault them, or we do something, a certain negative thought arises in our mind, even if we try not to. So even when that happens, Geshe says that it's important to attempt to prevent ourselves from acting upon those afflictive states of mind. So even if anger arises, even if you see faults in those people, it's important to arrest your physical and verbal actions, not to speak negatively, or not to take an action, physical action of harming those people. It's difficult to avoid those states of mind from arising, but at least what we can prevent is the coming together of actions of body, speech, and mind. So suppose that you get angry, but also on top of that, you act physically or verbally upon that anger, so that your body, speech, and mind all together are involved with anger. That would be creating a very heavy, a very strong negativity. So suppose that you get angry with another person, but you're not going to get involved in the actual performance of an action. So when we look at an action, there is the preparation part, which means the motivation part, and there's the actual performance, and then the conclusion of the action, the 3 parts of action. So suppose that you became angry with a person, and yet you haven't followed it up with a physical or verbal action. The actual performance was not done. So the negativity involved in that scenario would be a lesser negativity. Another thing that determines the power of negativity is the concluding part, in that suppose that you got angry at another person. You have done something to harm that person, and at the end, you're happy about it. You take joy in doing that. You think at the conclusion of that action that was a good thing to do. So that makes that negative action become very powerful. So this is also something that we can avoid doing, taking joy or feeling happy about those negative actions, in order to make sure that even though afflictions arise in the mind, still negative actions performed by the powers of the afflictions will not become strong.
Rediza nganzueta gewachi bikalaya lunga yisum gutone ani gewachi tuyelaya bebachi jung juksum gutone gewachi tuyelaya bebachi ro gewachi elaya jorotsam ngujitu ani ju gawakom ani dhyan chik zogsang le ngotubaina ani gewi zawati ani lame sanji ji komo mato pardo ani zawni nita 지게지게 윤지 책 말이 송로 디치고 거레스 다 디바치 쇼고르다 베나 아니 난조다 수수께오 차다모성 샹원디 교대인자 그 샹원디 교스라면서 디 쇼고르데니야 디드냠도 비길이야 지 룽아 있음 비길이야 마셔야 아니 지 정은 죽선 만상만식 개지 비길이야 쇼바이나야 디치 정은 주스 만상한지 돌이야 아니 베스치야 어두스 드로바이나 다치 수수 능아 있음 아니 칸투바디 첸 드로고연자 안 초지 잡았어야 제바이나 아니 니기로 왔어 레 딘디제스라
And similarly, when we consider virtuous actions, something can be said with respect to the performance of virtuous actions with our body, speech, and mind, right? So if virtuous actions are done together with body, speech, and mind, they become more powerful. If you make sure that the preparatory part, the initiating of virtuous actions, the actual performance, and the conclusion of the action, virtuous action is done well, in that you dedicate your virtuous action for the sake of complete enlightenment, so that the result of that action will not be consumed until the heart of enlightenment is reached. then such virtuous action will also become a very powerful virtuous action. So we look at those elements that come together for the performance of an action, either negative action or virtuous action, and we pay attention to those parts of body, speech, and mind, and also to the preparation, the actual performance, and the conclusion of the action. So when we consider negative actions, we still consider ourselves to be ordinary beings. And as such, we're under the control of anger, attachment, and ignorance. They are the factors that govern us. So it is important to make sure that when a certain scenario eventuates, we do not engage with this negative action with altogether our body, speech, and mind, or that we make sure that the three parts of the action, the preparation, the actual performance, and the conclusion of the actions will not come together, so that even though we're still under the control of anger, attachment, and ignorance, still negativities that will be created will not be so powerful. So if you attempt to do that, you will please the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions. The commentary to verse 30 says, I confess all negativities that I, this confused person, created with regard to the three jewels, my father, mother, and the other fields of merit, like other teachers and so forth, due to the cause of the three poisons, with the three doors of my body, speech, and mind.
Yeah.
So Claire also sent question here. It says, I may not understand this correctly, but when we take refuge, isn't a part of it not spending time with friends that hinder a practice of Dhamma? Say there is a friend who has many negative qualities and causes another to really strain to be patient and virtuous when in their presence. Should a person refrain from too much contact with a difficult friend until they feel their patience is better developed? Dila Karangi Pama Gewashin Dila Sokotola Dine Kalopchi Naimba Dila Konzo Mixegi Kesi Kondosawaina Minyagatsawa in the Chewaina Mixegi Ninja Hapa and Sewan Ninja Congo rest in this the Techimbe chewed in the Chewaina, then the Chego rest in Limba. Chezan Kurandito la Samotawaina ya Capture Labjala Dictok, then the Pango rest in Lagerwa, Tadila Kalagires and Kesi Kansachi la Tenne Soso Nyomon Pewaina, now Loba in the Chi Joina Consola, then the Nekabla Jama Sona Yagayores Conso. Then the Kalani Yomares, then the Chilagerwa. Chezan de la Ganda, then the Yomares.
Yomares. Ganda Yomares.
So Geshe doesn't see any problem, and it doesn't see any contradiction between the training of refuge, avoiding negative friends, and still having to adopt a higher sense of compassion, a higher sense of love and concern for people that give you problems. Like, if your parents are troublesome, if they're getting angry with you or irritating you and so forth. Geshe doesn't see any problems with these two practices.
Rata Digdok Pangor said Zawani Chitangi Chani Shevana, Zawani Deva Machis Lagomares, Labdun the changes in the Lavjana, Tinti, Sursam Chilea, Tingumares, the Kazim Petty Channels of Chichin Koya, Kazajarum Chigi, 아니 봐봐 두지심비요 언젠나는 갑두려야 내가 객도 뜬거면 송송 내가 뜻을 참은 건 랍셔라다 객 비려야 아니 파 비고야지다 출랭 거야지 나라메스 참을로 년도 때체 아니 소지 아니 가서 왔다지 아니 잠시 유래야 덴데셔에 마도 메송라 덴자 아니 지 배든 데미지는 샤고야 딘디 말스 비네야 비 랍샤 님바지 이 샤원도 만들어야 체 디드로 포인트 조디 디 디르와스로.
So in the training of refuge, it is said that one should give up negative friends. Now, to give up negative friends does not mean to say that now you need to sever all your connection or relationship with them. This is not the meaning of that. His honest, in some sense, referred to that when he gave the empowerment of the great compassionate one, Chamrezik, in the previous weekend. In the first day, he said that although in the actual ritual, you should start with making the Gektor offering. Gektor is the Toma to hindering forces. So you're making this ritual offering ceremony and you dispel or you chase away spirits or other forces that might hinder the practice or the ritual itself. So Geshe said that, so Izone says that although this is what one should be doing at this point in time, he said that he's not going to do it. He's not going to do it because then when he thinks of how you should develop that attitude of wanting to invite all sentient beings to be your guest and to treat them with that pleasing conduct of enlightenment, it doesn't make sense that you want to drive them away, that you want to chase them away. So Geshe feels that there's some advice that is honest give all of us with making that point. So to stay away from negative friends does not mean to say that you need to physically stay away from them. What it does mean is that you don't fall prey or you don't come under the influence of those that would give you a bad advice.
객tek 비캅도가 임바이네야. 그때 초교송이야. 그 다스 캐란파 주스 남에 콘드르 랜드카가 대치금도 콜이야 냠바테체 안 캐란가라야 아니 니디 뜻이 아니 추친이 집 깔아야 아니 발체 마치로 치스 캐란 판도로 치스 로 캐란 또만 추치 판도로 치스 아 야부진 땅근도 하더라 마마 경고도 뜻다 가가 아니 디 소수 콘도다 비려야 디 연구여바나 디 소수 노르여마도 아니 파좀이 깬 지고 돈이 총사고지 말아봤어.
Anyway, in that practice of Gektor, it's not that you just kind of scold them and say, go away, as if you expel them. It's more like you're making this Gektor offerings. You give them a present and say, for the time being, please don't create obstacles. Please don't make trouble to those students, those disciples that are here today. So please, for the time being, just stay away. So it's not that you treat those spirits or hindering forces harshly in expelling them, right? That's to begin with. Even more so with respect to our parents, right? Our kind parents. So it might be that they're becoming angry with us or being irritated with us, but sometimes things do not arise without any conditions. And this is also something that we need to keep in mind.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. We'll leave it here for now. So let's put the prayers on the screen.
Lama Sangye Tugune Do Achikama Lupa Te Salva Rumboji Magi Panamki Gyurji Gyawan Yamba Mebaya Oni Kundu Devara Shu Kowe Shenyale Pendan Dewa Malu Juweni Chenre Siwa Tenzi Gyanso
Shabe Sende Bardu Denguchi Sondu Jube Lam Shejere Sanze Kanji Denjungon Chana Bemo Tenzin Yang Sola Soan De So Jendung Shu Jinjang Gun Yawe Tenzin Jumbe Wen Gong So Go Cho Sum Ko Re Mon Tu Pan Dan So Tu Shi Gong Du Shao Din Shu. Thank you.
Thank you, Venerable Captain.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Geshe. Thank you, Venerable.
Thank you.
Thank you, Geshe. Thank you, Carlton.
Thank you, Jessica, Carlton, and Geshe. Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you very much.
What's it do?
Oh,
Bye, Tanya. Bye.
Thank you.
bye, Claire.
Have a great evening.
There you go.
Munich.
Thank you.
Wow, people are doing newness. It's the end of the world. Or the end of the virus world.
Oh, bye-bye. Thank you very much. Thank you, Justin. Thank
Where's
you.
Raptor?
In Sydney.
Christine, all right.
Bye-bye, all. Stay happy and healthy.
Thank you.
Anyway.